Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 41st chapter of the book of Job. This is the fourth and final chapter of Yahweh's two discourses, which begin in the 38th chapter. Therein, we witness him descend in the form of a whirlwind to meet Job, address Job specifically, but all his friends are in attendance, and he proceeds to ask Job a series of rhetorical questions. Rhetorical because not because the answer is obvious, but because they are designed to expose the ignorance and the impotence of not only Job, but all humanity. He argues very much from the vantage point of might is right, and if God is not God, he is not omnipotent, and if he is not just, then he is not God. So he has to be all the things that the Bible says he is in order to be God, and he is also the creator. So he proceeds from the foundation of creation. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Verse 4. Chapter 38, Job clearly was not there, but the angels, they were singing. And the first part of the 38th chapter is the cosmological and the earthly realm. But then as the chapter progresses, he moves into the meteorological, the lightnings and the forms of precipitation that hurl from the sky. Are they at yours to command? Can you make the lightning come and the rain to pour and all these other things? Then towards the tail end of the 38th chapter, he begins listing animals, and this very much defines the remainder of his discourse. Animals that are beyond mankind's capacity to domesticate, and they exist to remind us of our imperfections and our ignorance and our impotence. There are beasts that we cannot tame, and he describes several of these. And then the interlude comes in the 40th chapter. Here begins our review, and Job responds in as many words. He says he is speechless and insignificant, to summarize it as succinctly as possible. But the lesson we most recently covered actually begins in the 7th verse, so we're going to begin there. Now gird up your loins like a man. I ask you, and you answer me. Job was a man, and if you are a man, God expects you to act and behave like a man. Gender confusion. Now we are witnessing an aggressive expansion of the sin in the United States of America. It used to be spoken of in whispers and hushes. Not anymore. It's out in the open. It's everywhere. But the Old Testament is not unclear on this issue. Deuteronomy 22:5, woman shall not wear a man's clothing, nor a man a woman's clothing, for whoever does these things is abomination in the eyes of Yahweh your God. And so we have to take seriously what God takes seriously. He designed genders to do unique and complementary functions, but anything that confuses and bottom line, these sins, the types of sins that blur the clear distinction between male and female, are satanic. And we have to take seriously what God takes seriously. We have to take it as seriously as he does. He does not like that stuff. Would you also put aside my judgment? Would you pronounce me wicked and you be declared righteous? This also incidentally echoes the author of Job's written recorded form for the motivation of his tirade against Job. He was upset with Job's antagonist. This is Elihu, who we first meet in the 32nd chapter. He was upset with his antagonist for failing to answer satisfactorily or conclusively Job's question, and this was tantamount to dishonoring God in his estimation. And the nature of his beef and complaint with Job was that he had justified himself at the expense of Elohim. In Job's argument, he didn't quite say it like this, but it was that I am a just man, I did nothing to deserve this calamity. God did it, therefore God is responsible, and as such God is unjust. But there's so much that Job doesn't know. He cannot explain any of these rhetorical questions, and he does not know that curiously absent in the mention of all the humans in the book of Job is the mention of Satan, but we meet him in the first two chapters. And remember, these types of sins that blur the clear distinction between male and female are what? Satanic. So he is busy. He is the author of deception, and he is all the things we read of in the first two chapters, which are, he is a fallen angel, has heavenly access. He is the God of the world. He is the accuser. He is the tempter. And if you give him an inch, he will take a mile. But now to the 11th, 12th, and 11th through 14th verse. Scatter abroad the rage of your wrath, and look on everyone who is proud, and bring him low. Look on everyone who is proud, humble him, and tread down the wicked in his place. That word pride in the 34th and final verse of the chapter, we're not going to get that far today, but Leviathan, whom we're going to meet and explain in greater detail when we do, exists to be the kings of the sons of pride. He exists to humble man because it's this mammoth beast, this maritime creature that is a sea serpent of massive proportions. But the proud, only God can scatter the proud and bring them to the justice and debase them. The ones who lift themselves up in the New Testament read that he who exalts himself shall be humbled, and he who humbles himself shall be exalted. So God is going to work it out all in the end. Hide them in the dust together, bind their faces in obscurity. Then even I would confess to you that your own right hand saves you. If Job could do, now God is offering Job a challenge. If he can do any of these things, then he will gladly concede to him his challenge, his right to even challenge his justice or his sovereignty or any of that. If Job was capable of saving himself and of scattering the proud and defeating the wicked and punishing the wicked. And then it returns. So this parallels the 38th chapter. And then the tail end begins now because we revert once more to the untamable animals, one of whom, the one we meet in the 40th chapter, is Behemoth. From the author's physical description, or God's physical description rather, he seems to be describing what could be a hippopotamus or an elephant, but it is actually a mythical beast of massive proportions, not quite supernatural. And the Behemoth and Leviathan, they were believed in more fully by the ancients than we moderns believe in perhaps Biggie Man or the Bigfoot. Or the boogeyman or Bigfoot, any of those things. These were not unique to the Hebrew culture. They were around the Canaanite and adjacent nations. The Mediterranean, ancient Near East, alike had these creatures in their mythologies. And this is not an endorsement of their existence, but God is using a familiar metaphor and illustration to illustrate and explain his own power. Because these beasts that we cannot tame, he is at their sovereign command and control, and the distance between their strength and our strength, the distance between their strength and God's strength is even greater. In the verse 19, he describes him. He is the beginning of the ways of El. His maker brings him near his sword. So only he can draw the side to Behemoth. That is something we cannot do. This creature is beyond our capacity to kill, tame, domesticate, or anything. This is us. There's only one of these creatures, and legend has it that the Leviathan of whom we meet is the female one, and her male counterpart was killed by God in the beginning because if these creatures could procreate, it would just be beyond the earth's capacity to endure, or anyone living on it. Verse 23, see, if a river rages, he is not alarmed. He feels safe. Even the Jordan gushes in his mouth. The state of fearlessness is used originally by the war horse, which alone is the one domesticated beast, but God designed them to be domesticatable, and the only reason we're able to domesticate them is because of God's sovereign design. He laughs at fear. The Behemoth is described as a fearless creature, even as the Jordan River, this mammoth body of water, gushes into his mouth, floods him, and overwhelms him. He is calm, and he is not in panic or alarm or fear or any insecurity. And even if the entire Jordan River came into his mouth, so this is one giant, strong creature. Before his eyes shall he be caught with snares, or nose pierced. Snares were hunting devices. Now you can ensnare a bear, you can ensnare a lion, you can ensnare several creatures. The bear is perhaps amongst the mightiest land animals, but there is no snare that any of us could put behind behemoths. Nothing we could, and we cannot certainly pierce his nose. We could not make it that far. We could not even. So the ability to pierce something is a mark of ownership, and none of us can own him. None of us can control him. And Behemoth is a seafaring creature, but the Leviathan's home territory is the Mediterranean Sea. Behemoth might be in the Jordan. But Leviathan was the creature that was not unique to the Hebrew peoples. It was the common mythology of the Canaanite. And this is not an endorsement of their existence. God is using these figures of myth that would have been believable to an ancient audience, to just remind them of how much more powerful he is. He is the omnipotent one. That is the attribute of infinite or unlimited strength, and because he is God, he is omnipotent, he is omnipresent, he is omniscient, and he is just. If he were to cease to be any of the things, or anything else that he is, he would cease to be God. Chapter 41, first verse, lesson itself. Would you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? There are 4 appearances of Leviathan in the Old Testament, the earliest of which, narratively speaking, is in the book of Job, actually, in the 8th verse of the 3rd chapter, when Job is cursing the day that he was born. He summons on all the enchanters who are capable of issuing curses against Leviathan, this mammoth creature, to join in the chorus and sing in harmony with him while he's pronouncing woe on the day that he was born. But the fullest description by far is the 41st chapter, and we'll cover that, not the whole thing today, but then there's Psalm 74:16, and there he is a sea serpent whose neck is crushed, much as the serpent's is in Genesis 3. So this is also likened to a satanic creature, because he is a sea serpent, and the serpent was Satan's original manifestation. He's also an angel of light and a roaring lion and plentything else, but another one of his forms, he's also a dragon, is a snake, and Leviathan is a sea snake. And it is used metaphorically in Isaiah 21 twice to describe Babylon, the juggernaut empire on the rise that eventually would subsume and swallow Judah, as predicted by the prophet Isaiah. But this creature is, in any case, beyond a reckoning of any of our strengths, or it just taxes the mind to even fathom the thought of us drawing him with a hook or snaring a creature, a 7-headed creature, a 7-headed sea snake that was as long as 300 miles long, depending on the culture. So where could we even lay such a snare? This is not a fish. This is not a shark. This is not we can't even snare blue whales. And this mammal is even bigger than a blue whale. And to put that in perspective, an elephant is the size of a blue whale's tongue. But Leviathan may have been as long as 300 miles. Would you put a cord through his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? We read much the same thing rather recently in reference to Behemoth. Pierce his nose, so he's asking the same thing here. Could you put a cord through his nose, pierce it? You'd have to pierce it to begin with, or to pierce his jaw with a hook. What weapon can we conjure that will make a dent of a difference, or even injure this animal? The spears that we throw on him and the bows and arrows are as straw, we eventually read. Would he keep on pleading with you? Would he speak softly to you? Would he trust you enough if you were throwing things at him that he wouldn't barely notice? But he would not be begging for his life in any such encounter if we tried to go out there and give it our all with everything we had and everything we owned to tame this beast. He would not be at our mercy. We would be at his. We would be pleading to him, and we would be screaming in agony to spare our lives. But he will not. We cannot quiet him. We cannot control him. We cannot contain him. We cannot do anything to him. Would he make a covenant with you to be taken as a servant forever? A covenant is a term of geopolitical origin, although it does have a theological context. In its geopolitical context, it was the terms of arrangement of the treaties which define the relationship between a stronger and a weaker party. So the covenant was always initiated by the stronger party. So would Leviathan make such a covenant with us, and would he be our servant in such an arrangement? Because we cannot get him. We cannot utilize and harness his strength in the ways that we can. The ox, the domesticatable ox. We also read of the wild ox, which is now extinct somewhere in the previous chapters. Would you play with him as a bird, or leash him for your young girls? This is not a household pet. Some domesticated creatures are creatures of burden, but others are household pets. This is not a chihuahua. This is a mammoth being. And You could not use him as he is not a pet. This type of animal is as far from a pet as night is from day. You cannot bring him as a present to any of your offspring, and it's not a bird. It's a beast beyond reckoning in strength and all these other things. Would partners bargain over him? Would they divide him among the merchants? This creature is not for sale. You cannot. This is the one item in the ocean that no maritime or commercial professional can ever squibble over or ever get a hand or a finger into the making a profit off of this animal. It just defies logic that you could utilize him for any purpose of mercantile profit. Fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears. Harpoons are weapons that are effective on whales. The whaling, the way that the whales, as late as the New England whalers, they used harpoons to get the whales, strike them and lay the first blow in. But fishing spears, before fishing rods, there were fishing spears. So spears are actually one of the most primitive weapons. They are even older than bows and arrows. Bows and arrows are about 10,000 years old. Spears are about 30,000 years old. And the original way that hunter-gatherers would eat fish is through these far less efficient devices of stabbing the fish in the hopes of crushing it and being able to lift it up. Put your hand on him. Think of the struggle. Do not do it again. So this is not a pet, and what's the struggle. The struggle is something we do not want to get ourselves into, and if we were lucky to make it out alive, assuming that we even could, we would certainly not go back there and make the same mistake twice in the unrealistic hypothetical that we live to tell the tale. See, any hope of him is disappointed. He is laid low even at the sight of him. Your hopes are going to be dashed and frustrated if you try to use this creature for your benefit or for your advantage. This is a creature who exists to remind us of God's great power, because we look at these things and tremble. How much more should we look at God above us? This is the 11th verse. But we're at the 10th before that. No one is so foolhardy to wake him up. Who then is able to stand against me? I mistook this. He is using this Leviathan. You cannot wake him up. You cannot alarm him. You cannot upset him. You cannot injure him. You cannot antagonize him. And then remember the distance between Leviathan's strength and our own, and the distance between God's strength and Leviathan's. It's absolutely off the charts. It's an omnipotent being. Leviathan is a created creature, as mighty as and powerful as he is. He is but a blip in the total cosmos, and just the eternality of the Creator and the omnipotence. It just truly dwarfs Leviathan, even more so than Leviathan dwarfs us, but the Leviathan is used as a reminder and an illustration by God to point to himself. Who has given to me first that I should repay him? Under all the heavens that is mine. Paul alludes to this without exactly quoting it verbatim somewhere in the book of Romans. I forget the precise location, but he has an evangelical emphasis on it. Paul was all about spreading the good news, but in this original context, he is the Alpha and the Omega, so he is the beginning. Everything that moves and exists and owes its origin to him. We cannot give him anything that doesn't already belong to him. We cannot give to him first. Life itself is God's gift to us, and how we live that life can be our gift to him. But the life is his gift to us to even offer ourselves in whatever limited, humble, finite way we can to him. But we are not paying a debt. We are not satisfied, because we cannot satisfy the debt that we have to the Creator, who gave us breath and life, and not only that, but purpose and revelation and ethical standards to abide by. But under all the heavens, this is the panoramic scope of his sovereign jurisdiction, everything under the sun and everything over the sun, everything in the earth below and the sky beyond is his and belongs to him. He owns it and controls it. So the extent of his power is just so beyond us, so beyond Leviathan, far more us. So we are dealing with an omnipotent creature, and remember, God is very much arguing from the vantage point of might makes right. We're going to stop the lesson here, and the reason we're doing that is because we try to divide these things according to paragraph. So the original composition of the Bible, it was written in paragraph form. The introduction of chapters and verses were not introduced until the Latin Vulgate in 1328. But this is where the paragraph ends. The 11th verse. We'll take it up the next time. That's all the time we have for right now. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.